So hey, just to set the scene again. So I said to you that I think I wanted to introduce to you two really big well-being issues of our time. And one of them, the first one, relates to this notion of human well-being. The second one that I'd like to introduce to you, and I won't spend as much time talking about that, is that we have a massive issue on our hands which relates to planetary well-being. And there are many, I could go into many different areas, and you guys are probably have a greater or a more acute awareness of a lot of these things than many of the other generations do, which is a really positive thing. But I just want to give you some of the stats on that, because once again, it can be a bit alarming and confronting when you hear this stuff, but I think that these are messages that need to be heard, and I'll tie it all back together at the end. But we now know that things like, and I've got a couple of slides there, things like emissions, planetary pollution, population explosion within the world. I'll give you the stats on them. And, coupled together, and obviously these things all interact, is really quite alarming. Here is a graph that just came out from Cape Grim, which is in Tasmania. This was published just last week. So Cape Grim is one of the points in the world where they collect the CO2 levels in the atmosphere. It's sort of considered some of the cleanest air in the world. And so because it's clean and they don't get sort of pollutants, swafting in from some local factory, it's actually considered to be one of the best indicators of what's going on in terms of our CO2 levels in the atmosphere. Now, what you can see in this graph is that here are where's it gone? It's actually not showing up. Unfortunately, you can't see the blue is not showing up on this slide. I'll put these slides on Moodle so you can actually see them. But what I'll just sort of illustrate with this red dot, from about the 1800s, this is the sort of level of 280 parts per million was the atmosphere concentrations of CO2. And then over the next sort of, while, it went up slightly. And then what we've actually seen is this is the last 2,000 years. So from 1800, it was about 280. And it essentially had been about that concentration since the day dot. Right, so we see fairly standard CO2 levels in the atmosphere. So it tracked along at about 280, and we got to essentially what is the Industrial Revolution. And then we started to see an increase. And over the past 50 years, it crept up, and then this here is the curve that we've seen in the past sort of 20 or 30 years. The trajectory, the increase in carbon levels in the atmosphere is just gone absolutely nuts. Here are the readings for the past 30 years. You can see them as they climb. And just last week, they went over 400, which is, everyone was just going, man, surely it can't get to 400. Well, it's actually got there, and it got there a lot faster than we anticipated. So you can see the increase here, up to 400 parts per million. What's this resulting in? Well, we're already seeing the signs. Actually, Time magazine published their whole issue last November, was dedicated to the whole issue of climate change. And it's just a treachery that there have been scientists, particularly in the early days, who were just paid off by big companies like industry, coal industry, the petrol and oil industry, who were paid off to actually say it's just a furphy. There's no such thing as this is not really happening. And everyone's banging their heads, and the scientists were getting the data and they're saying, you can't lie about this, but look at this, here's the data. And they were explaining in a way and using crazy stuff. And in the minds of many people even today, like yesterday I went to the survey to get something. I was chatting with a guy as he was filling up a gas bottle for me, and I mentioned about some of these stats, and he goes, "Oh, you know what? It's not true." And I thought, serious, this is still in the mindset of people that this is not a reality. Well, you know what? It is a reality, folks. And like I say, we've now gone over 400 parts per million in terms of our CO2 levels. What we're seeing is that playing out already in global warming. This little graph here, you can actually get on, and it actually starts off in the 1850s. So they have pretty good measures of the global temperature over the past 150 years. And what you can see here are the days of the months of the year. And what you can see about 1950, it starts here and it does this little circle in here as the years roll on. And what we've seen, as soon as it got to the Industrial Revolution, when things started to hot up and we started to produce more stuff, is that they started to get more and more and more and more. And this average temperature, you can see the increase here, got hotter and hotter. The world's getting hotter. Look here at the stats. This is March this year to 2016. There's February 2016. Can you see that outer line? Mate, this thing is spiralling out of control. All right? And so we actually now have very good evidence. And look, even from our point of view, this is the hottest May we've ever had. Right? It has been hot. It's not like winter. We are seeing this worldwide. We know that there is a tipping point here. That you step over it and the world reacts, the planet reacts. It's very, very subtle. There's a fine balance in the way that this whole thing is programmed. And we're messing with that balance. You had a question?
Yeah, I was just thinking I agree that all of this is happening, everything, but my argument is how do you get the whole world to cooperate and try and reduce it? Like, I went to Thailand recently and there are cars and fumes and, how do you tell a third world country sorry,
yep.
Your whole way of living, you have to not do that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll come back to that at the end.
Like modern countries, we're all, making an effort to
yeah.
But there's so many countries that wouldn't even, they're like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the challenge. Let me show you this little graph here, which is quite intriguing. This here actually shows the increase in human population over the past 2,000 years. So in the day dot when Jesus was walking around in Palestine there was about 250 million people in the world. Okay, so 250 million people. Do you know what? It took about 1,500 years for that to double. So the population took about 1,500 years before the population level doubled. Today we see it double every 50 years or so. So here is the current population. No, we haven't got up there yet. It's about there. We've just crept over 7 billion people in the world. We're actually about 7.3 billion now. And here is the problem. The world is only this big. And it can actually cope with 7 billion people. It can even cope with 10 billion people. There are some forecasts that it could probably even cope with up to 15 billion people if everyone was happy to live like they do in India. Right? That is that sort of lifestyle. Are you happy for that? Would you like to live like they do in India? Probably not. I like my standard of living. That's really cool. But here's the deal. All the people in India, they look at our standard of living and go, we'd like to be like that too. So why can't we? Why aren't we entitled to that? Well, you know what? They have just the same entitlement to that as I do and as you do. And so what happens is there is this idea that, hey, we want this standard of living. And because we want that standard of living, then we have some major issues because the world's resources just can't cope with that. The industry required to respond to that. There's some people that say for the whole world, right? If the whole world wanted to live like we do in the West, with a high quality of standard of living, not the poor people amongst us, but the sort of the middle class to upper class, the capacity of the planet to support that is probably in the order of about 1.5 billion people. And we've got 7 billion of us here already. And the number is growing. So you know what? We have a major issue in terms of the well-being of our planet. What drives that? Well, the epidemiologists like to look at this, and this is what they find. Why is the planet getting hotter? Why is it starting to groan and moan under the strain of it all? Well, if you step back, the cause of that is actually things like pollution, it's carbon emissions, and all these sorts of things. Very true. Okay, but what's the cause of that? Well, the cause of that is that this industry, we actually want more stuff happening faster. We want new innovations. We want this 24/7. We want access to that. We want all this stuff. And so that industry is energy demanding. And so therefore that drives, so that's the cause, the actual ultimate cause of that. So what causes this drive in industry? What is it that makes this, everything just have to be going faster and faster and faster? Well, at the end of the day, it's actually economic growth that drives that. So here's the intriguing thing. we actually know that economic growth, at the end of the day, that economic growth, what is that? It's that's insatiable, speed up, more, bigger, better, actually not only results in human suffering in terms of human well-being, but it actually also ultimately results in planetary suffering as well. And so what we actually know, there's a great book by a guy that I do a lot of research with, he wrote it called Planet Obesity. And what he actually says is that the two things, what affects this economic growth at the heart affects human health, and it also affects the health of the planet. So what's bad for you is bad for the planet. What's good for you is also good for the planet. And we actually see this in the graphs. If you actually look at the way that, that chronic disease, the planetary poor health or well-being suffers, and it's getting worse, it's suffering more, that actually very much mirrors economic growth as well.